Amid ongoing geopolitical tensions and supply disruptions, the global fertilizer market remains on edge. From Sea shipping risks to the possibility of a broader peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, several developments could reshape nitrogen and phosphate trade in the months ahead. Today, I'm joined by Vice President of Fertilizer, Josh Linville. Thank you for joining us, Josh.
Absolutely. Great to see you.
How significant was the recent Houthi attack on a fertilizer vessel in the Red Sea?
Yeah, it sure seems like we can't catch a break. We had just gotten a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. It looked like things were finally calming down. Tensions were finally starting to cool down in the region. And then over the 4th of July weekend, started to find out from friends on Twitter that a ship had been attacked. And then later found out that ship in the Red Sea had been carrying at least a partial load of fertilizer. So this brings up another very important waterway for the world. We'd been focused on the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz. The Red Sea is just as important for any loads trying to get westward bound, trying to get to North America, Central America, South America. The fortunate part is the fact that there are at least routes around the area. If ship owners see these attacks going on and they say, I'm not willing to put my vessel and my crew at risk of these attacks, they can decide to say, we'll go west for you, but we're going to go south. We're going to go around the tip of Africa. However, that does mean longer sail times, and it also means a higher freight rate because that's more miles that need to be covered by that ship. So it is very disruptive. There are two things that are, I don't want to say beneficial, that's a bad way of saying it, but at least there are two positive things that come from it. We can find another route, unlike what would happen if the Strait of Hormuz were shut down. And the time of year, there's not a whole lot that needs to flow west. There's not a tremendous need right now for product to arrive. Had this happened right before spring, completely different story.
And with the Israel Iran ceasefire holding up, attention turns to Russia Ukraine. What could a deal between these nations mean for global fertilizer trade flows and pricing?
Yeah, spent a little time thinking about this over the long weekend. I actually got about 4.5 days off over the 4th of July, which is much, much needed with everything that's been going on all this year. But started thinking about, okay, with this behind us, what's next? And I do believe the world is going to turn its attention to Russia, Ukraine. While we think that peace opportunities are relatively low, it's not zero. This war cannot rage on forever. And one of the mistakes that folks make in the fertilizer world is thinking, oh, because Russia invaded Ukraine, Russian fertilizer exports just shut down. That was one of our fears back in 21, 22. That was never the case. However, Russia has been forced to go to other destinations around the world, focusing more on BRIC alliance members and things like that. So, if we were to start to see peace between these two nations, it could mean a lot of different things. The best among them is just the fact that normal trade flows could be reestablished, which would help farmers around the world.
If European access to Russian gas resumes and nitrogen production normalizes, what impact could that have on global nitrogen values in 2025 and heading into 2026?
So to me, this is the linchpin for fertilizer. And this is especially on nitrogen fertilizer. If you go back to 2021, the Russians and the Europeans were having a little bit of a fight back and forth about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and the use of natural gas in Europe. And eventually we saw that pipeline shut down. And what a lot of people forget about is that shortly after, somebody blew it up. I don't know that anybody ever took responsibility for it, but it doesn't change the fact the pipe were damaged deep underwater. But let's think through. If all of a sudden we find peace between Russia and Ukraine, and part of that peace deal is Russia saying, we need to make Europe take our gas. We need the income. We need the export marketplace. We need this to happen. And Europe says, you know what? To save Ukraine, we will accept that gas, fix the pipeline. So now all of a sudden we've got improved relations. We fix the pipeline. Gas flows start back in Europe. That should mean European natural gas prices start to fall out of bed, back down to the lows that they used to be. Well, European production on nitrogen has been about 75% of normal since that second half of 2021. That is millions of tons of urea and UAN and anhydrous that are not being produced on an annual basis. And think of the impact that has on the global S&D. It tightens it up. It makes things very bullish as a fact. Well, if all of a sudden those gas flows come back and if maintenance has been kept on these facilities and they can refire, suddenly all those come back online. Now, all of a sudden, not only is Europe back to producing tons, which helps the global supply, they no longer have to turn to the world looking for the supplies they've been looking for that they haven't been producing. So it helps both sides of the S&D equation. And then all of a sudden, we can start to look around the rest of the world and say, okay, China, is there a need for them to, continue to restrict exports? If everything else is normalized, prices are falling, we could see more normalized relations once again, more normal trade flows, which will help further drop the price. Honestly, if Russia Ukraine, if the peace deal is manufactured correctly with the right terms, that could be the linchpin that gets us back to lower prices.
So China has restricted fertilizer exports to protect its domestic market. Do you see those restrictions easing if global trade stabilizes? And what would it mean for the phosphate and nitrogen markets?
I think we could see it very, very quickly on the nitrogen side. We have seen the Chinese government restrict those. They've had two goals in mind whenever they've done these programs: keep domestic prices low versus the rest of the world and keep stockpiles high. Unfortunately for everybody else around the world, those two goals have been met with massive check marks. They've been wildly successful. But if global prices were to fall and all of a sudden supplies are back to feeling decent, well, there's no reason to have these back in place because everything is normalized once again. Phosphate may not have quite the same impact, even if everything normalizes around the world. We believe that Chinese demand domestically has increased, not only from a agricultural standpoint, but also look at battery. That technology has moved to a phosphate base. That's the new exciting technology that makes them that much better, more potent. Well, that's more demand on the phosphate market that farmers are having to fight against. I don't think that goes away short term. That's probably a longer term battery technology moves on to some other base. For right now, phosphate is where it's at. So phosphate probably doesn't recover quite as much as what we would see on the nitrogen side, but I do think it would help normalize a little bit more than where we are today, which is incredibly low phosphate exports.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your analysis, Josh. Great to speak to you again. For more videos like this, please do like and subscribe.